stuck here. The cops won't bother me. Hey guys, I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the disadvantages and advantages of the tenere, Super Tenere. So this is a 2012 model and I've been riding it for a while, and you know, I've had over 40 bikes and I've ridden quite a bit. So when I'm looking at bikes, one of the things I do appreciate about bikes is efficiency. And this bike is not efficient at all, but I keep telling myself, okay, so I'm losing out a little bit of efficiency for that shaft drive because it could be causing some of the efficiency issues. Also, this is a very heavy bike. Wet weight is 585. My V-Strom was like 490. So, I mean, that's actually not that much weight when you consider that it's a much bigger engine and it's got a shaft drive and the components on it are very well built. So Yamahas are known to be some of the more reliable motorcycles in the entire world. And that's kind of a big claim, but I think the stats do back that up. And the Yamahas that I've had have been extremely reliable. So this one's got 52,000 miles now. And of course, it completely sounds and behaves like a new motorcycle. And you know, I took a chance buying it. I went up to Rochester, New York, and I rode it down in a single day. And sight unseen, by the way, and that's something I usually never do. But since I got a good deal on it, I did take a chance. But I would not take a chance on a lot of motorcycles, but because I've had such a good experience with Yamahas and I've read a lot about this, I thought, yeah, there's no issue. I think I would shy away from other manufacturers. So when you're looking at this bike, it looks pretty good. I think one of the things I noticed right away is that if you ride in town, if it's the summer, you're going to find that there's a lot of heat coming from the left side of the engine. And every single motorcycle that I've had that's over 1,000 cc's creates so much heat. And if you ride off-road, you're going to see that heat be magnified. And of course, this one is an ADV bike. But I keep telling people that ADV bikes are really the new sport touring bikes, especially these bigger ones, because sure, there's like these guys that ride off-road all the time. They're posting pictures of them like riding in creeks and stuff, but that's not the norm. Most people that get this bike, they get it and they commute and they just do regular riding. That's why I think I can compare this to an FJR, because the same people that get the FJR are the same people that get this. They're the same people that get Concours. They're the same people that get NC 700s. It's the same sort of riding style. Your riding style most likely is not going to be changing much, other than riding some off-road. But that is the beauty of the adventure bike, is that it's got a little bit more plush suspension. And I think that plush suspension on these big bikes is much better for riding to a city and commuting, because you can go over speed bumps like it's nothing. The suspension, every time like you hit a pothole, it doesn't jar you. So for me, the adventure bikes are much better commuters than a sport touring bike, and I think that's the reason, if I was to keep a bike for a while, this is probably one of the styles that I would. But I've always been into these bikes. Even before they were called adventure bikes, they were called big trailies. And big trailies like the TDM 850, they had everything that bikes needed at the time. But I think the marketing behind motorcycling is to call everything an adventure bike, because they are capitalizing on the image of adventure, and I don't blame them. You know, motorcycling is kind of dying out. People are not into motorcycling as much, but because of COVID, of course, everybody's getting more into it. But it seems that the adventure segment is led mostly by money and marketing. because the people that ride these things are going to be riding for general type of riding. I think if a real person that was into adventure, they would get something smaller. But with that said, the heat on this thing is crazy hot. It makes a lot of heat on the left side. I've had hotter bikes like ST1300s. They're much hotter. And of course, suspension on this is excellent. I've always thought that it rides really well. It's adjustable. Everything about this bike is fully adjustable. It's got upside down forks. It's got really great stuff. It's got a shaft drive that's very reliable. Engine is very reliable. Even though these newer or these older Super Teneres have been known to have some engine issues with the cam chain, I don't really find that very much. Sometimes it's just a noisy engine. Now, downsides is that fuel efficiency is just terrible on this. The online miles per gallon calculator says it's like 45, but I doubt it's that. I think I'm getting closer to 38 miles to the gallon, and that's just crazy when you consider, you know, I have a Toyota Echo that gets 45 and a Prius that gets 55. And something is very odd that bike manufacturers can't make an efficient bike, and you have to look into scooters for that. I think that's one of the things that puts me off about this bike, is that it's a gas guzzler. Even riding normally, I can barely squeeze 200 miles on the tank. And I've ridden cross country. There's places that are, if you miss that gas station, you're not going to make the next one. So I like the idea of having a very large gas tank that I don't have to constantly be stopping at a gas station to fill up. And I think that's one of the issues with this. Now, when I had my FJR, that bike was so top heavy. This one doesn't feel as top heavy, even though it's a very heavy bike. The FJR was actually much heavier. I believe it was like 600 something pounds. This one's 575, but it doesn't feel like it. It really feels almost the same similar weight that the V-Strom 650 was, with better components. And a lot of it has to do with the suspension, especially when you go around a corner. The suspension on this is just so good that it just feels like it's a V-Strom 650. But if you push it, you do feel that this bike goes a little bit wider than the V-twin from the 650 or the Suzuki. The Suzuki V-Strom edges this thing out for handling. And I think a lot of people get very upset when I say that a bike is better than this one, because they're not comparable, but they are absolutely comparable. And I would probably even get another V-Strom 650 because I think it's a superior bike when it comes to handling and efficiency and everything. The only reason I'm keeping this Super Tenere is because of that shaft drive. And I really wanted a bike with a shaft drive that was ADV style, and I didn't want to get a BMW. Like, I put up many videos showcasing BMW's unreliability, and I know that BMW riders are very gung-ho about their bikes, but that tells me that they're just so blindly into the bikes that they're not able to like push themselves out and look at the bike from the outside. It is just simply very badly engineered. This one, it's very well engineered, but it lacks a certain je ne sais quoi that the BMW has. And when you compare this to the BMW, there are some big advantages that the BMW has. The boxer engine is much further down. The heads kind of stick out to the side, so that keeps the weight low. It's slightly lower weight, and it's got more power on the BMW. But to me, that does not compensate for the much more expensive service that you have to pay to fix a BMW, and for the questionable reliability that BMWs have. And I know that a lot of people are going to be, bashing me on it, but that's fine because they just break all the time. I've had two BMWs. Luckily, I sold them before they became boat tankers. I had a BMW, R1100 RS, and then I had an R1200 GS. And they just require just so much work to keep running when you compare it to these bikes. Like on a Japanese bike, the beauty is that you can just ride it. You don't have to constantly be maintaining it. You don't have to lube your shaft drive. You don't have to like constantly be tearing things down in preventive maintenance because they always work. You can really abuse a Japanese bike, but you really can't abuse a BMW bike, and that says a lot about engineering. I've had bikes that I've run with low oil, and by mistake, and they worked absolutely fine. They didn't even like give any issues. But the BMWs I've had, they have given me issues, and they cost me much more money to maintain, despite their reliability records. So this bike is a great bike, but it's got some faults. The weight of it, I really think the Super Tenere should have been a 1000 cc. And it should have a shaft drive. I do like the shaft drive option for a lot of bikes. I wish they had shaft drive options for smaller engines, but shaft drive is something that they only put in the higher end models. Now that I mention it, like the engine sounds really good for a parallel twin, but it doesn't sound good when it's idling or in the city. It sounds good when you're revving it. And I almost believe it sounds like a V-twin when you're revving it. You can watch my old videos to see, but it's something that I was not expecting from this. This one's got quite a bit of electronics that I'm not used to. This has got much more electronics than I've had on other motorcycles. It's got traction control and power modes, but I find that most of the time you don't need any of that. They could have just skipped on it and just disabled traction control. But it does make it safer, and it's got ABS, so that's kind of crazy when you think about it. Usually I like things to be super simple, and I actually didn't even know about this when I bought it. But yeah, it's got traction control, 3 modes for traction control, and then 2 modes for power modes, touring and a sport. I just leave it in sport. And then it's got ABS, and for me that's kind of insane. It's very narrow at the rear and then expands crazily at the gas tank, and then it narrows back down towards the head. The V-Strom was very wide at the front, so I do like the looks of this. And if you get a Super Tenere, you're going to get a bike that not a lot of people have. So while everybody has GS's and KTM's and Africa Twins, this is kind of a cool bike. There is a review by Fortnite, and he wasn't too impressed with this, but I think he's kind of missing out. Because these Super Teneres, they're not bought by people that have this passion for the engine and the power and like the cutting edge. It's just a super reliable engine that gets the job done. And I think that's kind of like what I like about this, is that it has everything I want, plus the reliability. While you're going to be having issues with the KTM, you could just be riding this thing. It just doesn't need anything. It's just a super reliable, rock solid motorcycle that you can fully depend on to take you across the world. It really is that sort of bike. The little downsides it has, I think they're very well compensated by its advantages. And the newer ones, I would recommend you get like an 05 or something and up, because they fix the quirks on those than these. You can fix the quirks on these, but I believe that the owner did that on this, because this thing sounds so new. The cam chain just doesn't make any noise. It's very well done. Alright guys, that's just a little talk about the Super Tenere. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a great bike, and I think it's a good alternative to the other big bikes like the GS, the Africa Twin, the KTM, and I think you get a much better bang to the buck with this than you would on the other bikes. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.
There's only one thing that could make this moment any better.
What's that?
If you had a nice set of knockers.
That's 2 things, Lloyd.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing you're not stacked, Harry, or I'd be banging you right now.